The slicing sound of canvas, torn from the inside, echoed not in the air, but in the dreadful silence that followed. 9 experienced hikers, caught high on a snowy mountain, had cut their way out of their tent into a brutal Siberian night, fleeing from something unseen, unheard, and utterly terrifying. This is the story of the Dyatlov Pass Incident, a chilling mystery that has haunted Russia for decades, a true macabre puzzle piece in the tapestry of human exploration and terror. It begins not with screams, but with the quiet resolve of youth and adventure, set against the unforgiving canvas of the Ural Mountains in the winter of 1959. 9 seasoned trekkers, led by 23-year-old Igor Dyatlov, embarked on a Grade 3 winter expedition, a journey of significant difficulty that would test their endurance and skill. Their goal, to reach Otorten Mountain, a formidable peak 10 kilometers north of their final, tragic campsite. The team was a vibrant mix of students and graduates from the Ural Polytechnic Institute, all proficient in skiing and mountaineering. There was Yuri Yudin, the only one who would survive, reluctantly turning back due to illness. There was Lyudmila Dubinina, the sole woman among 8 men, known for her adventurous spirit and sharp wit. Semyon Zolotarev, the oldest at 38, was a mysterious veteran with a camera always close at hand, an enigmatic figure whose past was as shrouded as the mountains they explored. Georgy Krivonishenko and Yuri Doroshenko, both good friends, often led the group in songs, their voices echoing through the silent wilderness. Zinaida Kolmogorova, Igor Dyatlov's occasional girlfriend, brought a youthful exuberance and meticulous attention to their logbooks. Alexander Kolevatov, a quiet intellectual, was known for his calm demeanor. Nikolai Thibault-Brignoles, a Swiss-French engineer, possessed a methodical approach to challenges. And Ruben Slobodin, a skiing instructor with an infectious laugh, was the heart of the group's morale. They were, by all accounts, an ideal team, prepared for the hardships of the Russian wilderness, their spirits high as they pushed deeper into the desolate landscape. Their journey began on January 25, 1959, from Bazai, the last inhabited settlement. A local truck ferried them to a distant mining settlement, from which they began their arduous trek on skis. The initial days were typical of a challenging winter expedition: hard work, camaraderie, and the breathtaking, stark beauty of the Urals. They kept a detailed logbook, filled with playful entries, shared jokes, and the everyday struggles of life on the trail. Their entries speak of freezing temperatures, exhausting climbs, and the ever-present hunger. On January 28, Yuri Yudin, suffering from sciatica and a growing sense of unease, made the difficult decision to turn back. It was a choice that saved his life, but would forever haunt him. The remaining 9 pressed on, unknowingly walking towards their doom. Their last known entry, dated January 31, describes preparations for ascending through a mountain pass. It mentions setting up a cache of food and equipment for the return journey, a testament to their careful planning and expectation of success. They described the conditions: the wind is strong, constantly bringing new snow, creating an illusion of forward movement. There is not enough strength for another trip today. From there, they were meant to begin their ascent of Otorten, a word that in the Mansi language, an indigenous group of the region, chillingly translates to "don't go there." A prophetic warning, perhaps, from the ancient spirits of the land. On February 1, the group, now 8 after Yuri Yudin's departure, began to climb Kholat Syakhl, a mountain whose name held an even more ominous meaning: Dead Mountain. The weather had begun to deteriorate rapidly, marked by heavy snowfall and decreasing visibility, a whiteout that swallowed the vast landscape. It's believed that Dyatlov, either due to a navigation error in the blinding conditions or a deliberate choice to seek shelter, led them slightly off course. Instead of camping in the relative shelter of the forest below, they established their camp high on the exposed eastern slope of Kholat Syakhl. This decision, seemingly minor at the time, made on a desolate, featureless slope, would prove fatally catastrophic. They pitched their tent, an enormous, custom-made canvas structure designed for 9, by cutting into the snow. This was a common technique for protecting against the relentless Siberian wind, creating a snow wall for insulation and stability. The final photograph from their camera, retrieved weeks later, shows the tent being erected, the last mundane act before the night descended, before the unknown arrived. Inside, they prepared a final meal, likely a simple dinner of tinned meat and bread, before settling down for the night, probably around 8 or 9 p.m. The mountain wind howled its ancient song outside, a familiar soundtrack to seasoned hikers. But something else was stirring in the vast, silent wilderness. Something that would shatter their quiet repose and tear their world apart. When the group failed to return by February 12, the original estimated date, it caused no immediate alarm. Delays were common in such expeditions. However, by February 20, with no word, relatives of the missing hikers demanded action. A full-scale search and rescue operation was launched, involving volunteers, military personnel, and even aircraft. The search team scoured the vast, desolate landscape, battling fierce blizzards and the relentless cold, a desperate race against time in an unforgiving environment. The breakthrough, if it can be called that, came on February 26. A search party led by Boris Slobtsov, a student, spotted the corner of a distinctive large tent, partially buried in snow, on the slope of Kolytsyakhl. What they found next would forever etch this incident into the annals of the unexplained. The abandoned tent snow was ripped open, not from the outside, but from within. It lay half collapsed, its interior still containing belongings, boots, backpacks, food, cameras, journals, as if the occupants had fled in a sudden, panicked rush, leaving everything behind. A pair of untouched warm felt boots stood neatly at the entrance, a chilling testament to the haste and desperation that had gripped them. All 9 sets of boots were still inside the tent. What could compel 9 experienced mountaineers to cut their way out of their shelter in sub-zero temperatures, into a blizzard, without their most crucial protective gear, without even their shoes? The sight screamed of terror. The footprints told a chilling, incoherent story. 9 distinct sets of bare or sock-clad footprints led from the tent, down the slope, towards the tree line in the valley below, an inexplicable trail in the deep snow. They were partially obscured by fresh snowfall, indicating that whatever happened, it happened quickly, before the new snow had a chance to completely cover the tracks, hinting at a desperate, immediate flight. These footprints, initially clustered together, began to fan out, then coalesced again, some showing clear impressions of bare feet. This detail alone defied logic. In temperatures plunging to -25 to 30 degrees Celsius, survival for more than an hour or two without proper clothing was unthinkable. Yet, they had clearly run, some barefoot, for over a kilometer. The search followed the trail of footprints for about 1.5 kilometers down the slope, into a frozen forest bordering the mighty Lazva River. There, under the branches of a large cedar tree, the first 2 bodies were discovered on February 27. They belonged to Yuri Doroshenko and Georgy Krivonishenko. They were found side by side, dressed only in their underwear, their feet bare. A small, desperate fire had been built near them, but it had long since died, its embers cold, offering no warmth against the Arctic night. The branches of the cedar tree were broken up to 5 meters high, suggesting someone had desperately climbed it, perhaps to look for something, or to escape from something stalking below. The state of their bodies was unsettling, their skin had a strange brownish-red hue, and their hands were scraped and bruised, indicative of a struggle or a desperate, clawing climb up the tree. Just days later, between the cedar tree and the tent, 3 more bodies were found, scattered across the slope, as if frozen in a desperate attempt to flee or return. First, Igor Dyatlov, lying on his back, his head pointed towards the tent, as if attempting to return to it, perhaps for the warmth, perhaps for answers. Next, Zinaida Kolmogorova, similarly positioned, roughly 600 meters from the cedar, her body seemingly oriented towards the abandoned shelter. Finally, Ruben Slobodin, found face down, buried in snow. These 3 were better dressed than the first 2, some wearing multiple layers, but still inadequately for the extreme cold. Dyatlov and Kolmogorova showed defensive postures, arms raised as if shielding themselves from an unseen attack. Slobodin had a crack in his skull, an injury inconsistent with a simple fall, yet found in a location where there were no visible obstacles. All 3 showed signs of advanced hypothermia, but the details of their deaths, and the injuries, began to weave a more complex, sinister tapestry of dread. The discovery of the remaining 4 members of the expedition would take another 2 agonizing months. Heavy snowfalls buried their tracks and bodies deeper, prolonging the desperate search. It wasn't until May 4th, as the snows finally began to melt, revealing the grim secrets they held, that searchers located the bodies of Lyudmila Dubinina, Semyon Zolotarev, Alexander Kolevatov, and Nikolai Thibault-Brignoles, buried under 4 meters of snow in a deep ravine, about 75 meters further into the forest from the cedar tree. What they uncovered solidified the Dyatlov Pass Incident as one of history's most perplexing and horrifying mysteries. These 4 had suffered catastrophic, unimaginable injuries. Semyon Zolotarev had massive chest trauma, with multiple broken ribs, akin to the force of a car crash, as if he had been struck by an immense, invisible force. Lyudmila Dubinina had similar severe chest trauma, but more horrifically, her tongue, eyes, and parts of her lips were missing, as if surgically removed, or eaten by an unknown entity, a detail that chills to the bone. Nikolai Thibault-Brignoles had a massive skull fracture. Alexander Kolevatov showed severe facial injuries and signs of internal bleeding. Yet, despite these horrific internal injuries, there were almost no external wounds or signs of struggle on their bodies, no defensive marks on their hands, no torn clothing that wasn't self-inflicted. Their skin, too, shared the strange brownish-red discoloration noted in the first 2 victims. Furthermore, some of their clothing, tested later, showed traces of radiation. The forensic contradictions were stark and utterly baffling. How could individuals sustain such immense internal trauma without visible external marks? The medical examiners ruled out a struggle between the hikers, noting the absence of any defensive injuries on their hands or bodies that would indicate a fight. The official conclusion was that the hikers died from a compelling natural force. But what natural force could cause such specific, brutal injuries while leaving other bodies relatively unscathed, and compel them to flee their tent in such a desperate manner? The questions mounted, each more unsettling than the last. The clothing found on the bodies added another layer of mystery, a macabre puzzle piece. Some of the deceased in the ravine were found wearing clothes that had belonged to the other group members, specifically those who had died closer to the cedar tree. For example, Lyudmila Dubinina was wearing Krivonishenko's pants and sweater. This suggested that in their final moments, in the unimaginable cold, they were stripping clothing from their deceased comrades, a desperate act of survival. Yet, why were Doroshenko and Krivonishenko so sparsely dressed in the first place? Why did Dyatlov, Kolmogorova, and Slobodin appear to be trying to return to the tent, while the last 4 seemingly tried to dig a snow den in the ravine? The timeline of events, the sequence of deaths, and the motivation behind their actions remained utterly obscure, shrouded in the silence of the Dyatlov Pass. The official inquiry was closed quickly, its findings classified and the case files sealed for decades. The remote location, the limited resources, and perhaps a reluctance to delve deeper into such an unsettling series of events, led to the ambiguous conclusion of an unknown compelling force. This secrecy, more than any other factor, allowed theories to proliferate, ranging from the mundane to the utterly bizarre, transforming the Dyatlov Pass from a tragic accident site into a crucible of conspiracy, a haunting whisper in the mountains. One of the most immediate and frequently debated theories attributes the deaths to an avalanche. Proponents suggest a small, localized slab avalanche could have startled the group, burying their tent and forcing them to cut their way out. The impact could also explain some of the traumatic injuries, such as those sustained by Thibault-Brignoles and Zolotarev. The weight of snow, they argue, could inflict powerful, blunt force trauma. However, this theory faces significant hurdles. There was no visible evidence of a large avalanche on the slope, no characteristic snowmasses, no disturbed snow layers that would indicate a massive slide, and the tent itself was only partially buried, not crushed. The footprints leading away from the tent were clear, not scattered by a massive snow movement. Moreover, an avalanche wouldn't explain the highly specific, internal trauma with no external marks, nor the missing tongue of Dubinina, or the traces of radiation. Why would they flee downhill into a forest instead of across the slope to safety if an avalanche was coming from above? Another theory points to hypothermia and a phenomenon known as paradoxical undressing. In severe hypothermia, the body's thermoregulation system can malfunction, causing victims to feel intensely hot and strip off their clothes, even in freezing temperatures. This could explain the minimal clothing on some of the victims, their bare skin exposed to the lethal cold. However, it fails to account for the internal injuries, the ripped tent, or the hurried, panicked escape. Hypothermia alone doesn't explain the initial catalyst that drove them from their shelter, forcing them to destroy their only protection in such a desperate manner. What truly sparked the terror? Could it have been an attack by indigenous Mansi people? The area was traditional Mansi hunting grounds, and initially, this was a strong suspicion, leading to the interrogation of several Mansi individuals. They were the most obvious human threat in such a remote region. However, investigators found no evidence of Mansi involvement. The footprints were clearly from the hikers, and there were no other human tracks at the scene. The Mansi were known to be peaceful, and they revered the mountains, considering certain areas sacred. The specific injuries were also inconsistent with traditional Mansi weapons. This theory was quickly dismissed by the authorities, leaving the question of a human antagonist unanswered. The more unsettling theories emerge from the shadows of the Cold War. One prominent idea suggests military involvement, specifically the testing of a secret weapon or missile. This theory is bolstered by several pieces of evidence: the strange orange spheres or bright flying objects reportedly seen by other groups of hikers and meteorologists in the region around the same time. The presence of radiation on some of the clothing, though dismissed by Soviet authorities as insignificant, fueled these suspicions. The sealing of the case files and the subsequent lack of transparency only deepened the belief in a cover-up. What if the hikers stumbled upon a secret test site, or were victims of a weapon with unknown effects? This aligns with broader concerns of the era, where military development often occurred with little regard for environmental consequences or human safety. As one scholar noted in their 2016 PhD research on environmental history, the 20th century saw numerous instances where the environment became a legal historical problem, directly linked to the ecological thinking that arose in response to major environmental disasters caused by human technological pursuits, often military in nature. In such a context, the Dyatlov Pass Incident could be viewed not just as a tragedy, but as a chilling glimpse into the unintended consequences of unchecked military experimentation, a sinister secret buried beneath the snows. Building on the idea of a secret weapon, some have speculated about infrasound. This theory posits that a rare meteorological phenomenon, such as a Kármán vortex street forming around the peak, could have generated powerful, low-frequency sound waves. Infrasound, inaudible to the human ear, is known to induce feelings of anxiety, fear, panic, and even physical discomfort, including nausea and disorientation. A sudden blast of infrasound could have plunged the group into a collective state of terror, driving them from their tent in a frantic attempt to escape an unseen, unheard threat, leading to irrational behavior like undressing in the cold. The subsequent disorientation could have led to falls and the severe, blunt force trauma observed. This theory elegantly explains the simultaneous panic and the lack of external struggle, yet it remains difficult to prove scientifically in retrospect, leaving it as a haunting possibility. Other, more esoteric theories delve into the realm of the paranormal, fueled by the sheer impossibility of the official explanations. Tales of a Yeti or an unknown, aggressive animal attack have circulated, though the absence of any animal tracks and the unusual nature of the injuries make this highly improbable. There are even theories of alien encounters, some localized atmospheric anomaly, or some kind of localized curse associated with the dead mountain. While these ideas add to the lore, they offer little in the way of concrete, verifiable explanation, instead pointing to a fundamental gap in our understanding, a crack in the veil of the known world. In 2019, Russian authorities, responding to decades of public pressure and enduring mystery, reopened the investigation into the Dyatlov Pass incident, promising a definitive answer. Their conclusion, announced in 2020, leaned heavily towards a natural cause, a combination of a slab avalanche and poor visibility. They posited that a small, delayed slab avalanche, triggered hours after the tent was pitched, created a muffled sound that startled the hikers. They then cut their way out, panicked, and were disoriented by the low visibility, unable to find their way back to the tent, eventually succumbing to hypothermia and the trauma from falls. While this theory attempts to reconcile some elements, it still struggles to explain the extreme, specific internal injuries without external bruising, the missing body parts, the radiation, or the sheer, undeniable terror that must have gripped them to abandon their survival gear in such conditions. Many experts and enthusiasts remain unconvinced, arguing that the official explanation simplifies a deeply complex and contradictory set of facts, leaving the most horrifying aspects of the mystery frustratingly unaddressed. The Dyatlov Pass incident continues to defy easy answers. Was it a freak of nature, a conspiracy, or something else entirely? We are left with fragments, a shredded tent on a desolate slope, 9 sets of footprints leading to oblivion, and bodies bearing injuries that whisper of unspeakable horror. The mountains, silent witnesses to that terrifying night, refuse to yield their secrets. The official records are sealed, the theories are debated, and the ultimate truth remains elusive, a chilling echo in the vast, unforgiving wilderness. What truly happened on that desolate Dyatlov Pass? What compelled those 9 skilled hikers to flee their shelter into the brutal cold, only to meet such grotesque ends? The answers, it seems, are still buried somewhere in the snows of the Ural Mountains, waiting for a truth that may never be fully uncovered. The incident stands as a stark reminder that some historical enigmas refuse to be solved, forever casting a shadow of doubt and dread, a testament to the dark, unknown forces that sometimes lurk just beyond the edge of our understanding. And perhaps, some secrets are meant to stay buried.